Hi, one and all. It's Mallu here, and today we look at the part 2 of Plant Kingdom. So, I hope the life cycles of algae and bryophytes are clear to you. So, today we look at the divisions of pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, and we learn how to draw the life cycles of them. As you all know, repeated revision and active recall is the mantra to memorize everything. So I'll start with the template or the standard cycle. So this will help you to remember how to draw the standard cycle. So let's do it in a quick piece. So let's see the gametophyte. It produces what? Gametes. And then they undergo fertilization to form zygote. And the zygote in turn produces the sporophyte. And now the sporophyte produces spores through meiosis, and then it in turn produces the gametophyte. So this is a basic cycle. Now let's move on to the life cycle of pteridophytes. So as you all know, the algae and bryophytes, they were predominantly haploid in nature, right? So that we started by their gametophyte in their life cycle. So first we wrote the gametophyte because they were predominantly haploid. Am I right? So, but the rest of the divisions of plant kingdom, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, they are diploid. So, for pteridophytes also, we start by writing the sporophyte as it's the predominant phase of the life cycle of pteridophytes. So we start with this sporophyte 2n. We start from here. Is it clear to you? Now, within the sporophyte, you have the sporophyll. And within the sporophyll, you have the sporangia. And within the sporangia, meiosis occurs, and then you have the spores. Now, these spores produces the gametophyte. Literally speaking, it's the reversal of this cycle. Only because it's diploid in pteridophytes. I hope you understand. So it produces the gametophyte, and then gametophyte in turn produces the male and female reproductive organ. The male reproductive organ being antheridia, and the female reproductive organ being archegonia or archegonium, and antheridia produces the androzoid, and archegonium produces the egg. They both fuses to form the zygote, and the zygote in turn produces the sporophyte. Is it literally simple? So you have to learn the basics first. You have to learn the basic standard life cycle, and then you have to build the life cycle of algae, and then the bryophytes, and then the pteridophytes, because all these divisions are arranged in the basis of evolution. All right, so this is the thing. So pteridophytes also have the sporophyte of pteridophytes also have true stem, true leaves, and true root-like structures too. So within the leaves, like the sporangia bearing leaves are known as the sporophyll, and within the sporophyll you will have multiple sporangia. Sporangia are like sacs having or they undergo meiosis to produce the spores. So are you getting it? So that's the thing. Now, before going to learn the life cycle of gymnosperms, you have to understand that these evolved from pteridophytes. And the basic difference between algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes from the gymnosperms and angiosperms is that the gymnosperms and angiosperms are seed-bearing divisions. They produce seeds. And for that, they are also known as what? Phanerogams, means they are seed producing, whereas the algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes, they are cryptogams and they don't produce the seeds. But When moving from pteridophytes to gymnosperms, some of the members of the pteridophytes show this seed producing habit, or they are heterospory. So we have two terms, homosporous and heterosporous. So what does this mean? Homosporous means they produce a single type of spore, which means there is no differentiation between the male and female spores. No difference between male and female spores. I hope you understand this notation. Actually, we write this notation is for male and this is for female. All right. So there is literally there is no difference between the male and female spores in homosporous condition, whereas in heterospory there is a difference between the or there are two types of spores, which are the male spores and the female spores. So now what I'm gonna lecture is that two members of pteridophytes also exhibit this characteristic of heterospory. As you all know, this is a part and parcel of evolution. So these pteridophytes are going to become gymnosperms. So some members of the pteridophytes show this seed producing habit known as heterospory. So what are those examples? Selaginella and Salvinia. Actually, I'm not going into textual basis, like for example, in case of algae, I never spoke about the examples of Rhodophyceae, Phaeophyceae and all those things. It's only because you have to go through the NCERT text thoroughly for any exams, may it be the Neet or your board exams. But what I'm focusing over here is that the things that you may find difficult to learn. All right. So these are the plants within the pteridophytes which shows heterospory. So but this is the basic life cycle of pteridophytes. Now let's see how will be the heterosporous life cycle of pteridophytes. Let's see heterospory in pteridophytes. I hope you are catching with me. Let's see. So with what do we start, gametophyte or sporophyte? Yes, we start with sporophyte because they are predominantly diploid. So we start with sporophyte, and what does it produce? It produces sporophyll, right? But in heterosporous condition, it produces male and female types of sporophyll. When it comes to male, we call it as microsporophyll, and when it comes to female, we call it as megasporophyll. Factually speaking, it refers to the size of the leaves. In case of male, it will be small, so we call it as microsporophyll, and in case of female, we call it as megasporophyll, just the English terms. And now microsporophyll produces the microsporangia, and the megasporophyll produces the megasporangia. So as I have told in my last video, you have to draw with me, then it would be better for you. All right, and now they undergo meiosis. To form what? To form microspore. And megasporangia undergoes meiosis to form what? Megaspore. Fine. And now microspore forms the male gametophyte. Alright. And the megaspore produces the female gametophyte. The rest are the same. Male gametophyte produces the antheridium, and female gametophyte produces the archegonia, and from archegonia you have the egg, and from antheridium you have the androzoid, and then they fuse to form zygote, and the zygote in turn produces the sporophyte. Isn't it simple to draw the life cycles? Yes. So, where were the differences? Let's see. See, sporophyll. The sporophyll became microsporophyll and megasporophyll. And sporangia, they also got differentiated. The one with the male, it forms the microsporangia, and one with the female forms the megasporangia. Then meiosis happens. Here we just had one type of spores, which is the homosporous, and now we have heterospory, that is the male and the female microspore and the megaspore. So that completes the life cycle of pteridophytes. But here we have a difference, a speciality in case of the gametophyte of sporophyte. I'll tell you. See, the gametophyte of sporophyte is somewhat special. We call it with the name prothallus. And the features of prothallus is that they are multicellular, they are independent from the sporophytic generation or the sporophytic phase, and they are heart shaped. So with that, we complete the life cycle of pteridophyte. So having learned the life cycle of heterospory in pteridophytes, it's quite simple to learn the life cycle of gymnosperms. So there will be slight modifications when heterospory in pteridophytes develops to form the gymnosperms, which is the next division in plant kingdom. So let's begin. As you all know, gymnosperms, isn't it predominantly diploid in structure? Its life cycle is predominantly diploid. So what do we start with? Gametophyte or sporophyte? We start with sporophyte. And the sporophyte is diploid. So coming to gymnosperms, and a difference from with this from that of pteridophytes is that before forming the microsporophyll and the megasporophyll, it's condensed into a cone-like structure. All right, it's condensed into a cone-like structure. So we have the male cone and the female cone. And within the male cone, we have aggregation of what? Microsporophyll. Are you getting this? Microsporophyll. And the female cone bears the megasporophyll. Alright. And now, the rest is the same thing. The microsporophyll produces or bears the microsporangia. And within the megasporophyll, we have the megasporangia. Alright, and what happens? There occurs meiosis, and it forms the male gametophyte. And meiosis to the megasporangia of gymnosperms produces the female gametophyte. But there's gonna be a difference here. Here we call the male gametophyte as pollen grain. The male gametophyte in gymnosperm is known as pollen grain, and the female gametophyte in gymnosperms is also known as endosperm. Alright, I hope you are getting this. So the male gametophyte produces the male gamete. Don't worry, I'll give you a comparison with the pteridophytes after this completion. And the female gametophyte produces the archegonia. And now there is fusion between the male gamete and the archegonia to form the zygote, which eventually forms the sporophyte. So that completes the life cycle of gymnosperms, but you have new terms like pollen grain, endosperm, and a lot of other stuffs. So let's have a comparison between pteridophytes and gymnosperms at the earliest. So let's see. So here the main difference is that we have the introduction of male cone and female cone, which is not present in pteridophytes. Alright, the next thing is that the male gametophyte over here is just male gametophyte, but in gymnosperms we call it by the term pollen grain. And coming to the female gametophyte, it's just represented female gametophyte in pteridophytes, but here we also call it as endosperm. Okay, and now from the female gametophyte we have the archegonia, and archegonia produces egg in pteridophytes, but here we just stop at the step of archegonia. And the male gametophyte in pteridophyte produces antheridium and anthrozoid, but here the pollen grain or the male gametophyte just produces the male gamete. So let's go into minute details. So pollen grain, what do you understand by the term pollen grain? It's actually the male gametophyte, and it's somewhat schematically represented like this, and it bears two gametes, and these two gametes are known as they are the gametes. All right. Okay, another thing is that within the microsporangia of gymnosperms, and we also have I forgot to write this. We have here the microspore, and meiosis of megaspore gives us the megaspore, and megaspore develops to become the female gametophyte. Okay, so all the microspores in microsporangia are released. So the thing is that within the microsporangia, okay, it's like a sac, like, right, which undergoes meiosis to form numerous microspores, and when there is dehiscence or breakage to the microsporangium, microspores are released. So I'll just give you an example. Consider a gymnosperm. Pinus is one of the gymnosperm. So we have male pinus and female pinus. This is male and we have female. So in one of its leaves, what do we have? Microsporangia. And within the microsporangia we have the male gametophyte, which is the pollen grain developing. So once there is dehiscence or breakage to this pollen to this microsporangium, a vast number of thousands of pollen grains are released. Okay, but when it comes to the female gametophyte, in the megasporangium, only one megaspore is formed, and that megaspore is known as megaspore mother cell, or conventionally we call it as MMC, spore mother cell. We also call it as MMC. So what happens over here? For example, let's consider this as the megasporangium. So what happens within the megasporangium? We have several cells over here, and all of them are haploid or diploid. They are diploid because, as you all know, sporophyte is diploid, the cones are diploid, microsporophyll is diploid, and microsporangium is diploid. The same thing matters over here too. So these are diploid in structure, but only one of this cell undergoes meiosis to form the and that cell is known as megaspore mother cell. All right. for example, let's take as this cell to be the potential megaspore mother cell. All right. So this megaspore mother cell undergoes meiosis. In the last lecture, I gave you an idea about what's meiosis and what's mitosis. So you get four spores, right? But out of this, 3 of them degenerates and just 1 of them becomes the megaspore, and it undergoes repeated mitosis. Okay, it undergoes repeated mitosis means that megaspore mother cell, which I represented in blue color, it undergoes repeated division and forms several haploid structure. Okay, this is what happens. Now this megaspora, and now within the megasporangium, I'm giving you a schematic representation, right, for better understanding the concept. So here our megaspore has repeatedly divided. These are diploid and these are haploid, and out of this one of the cell develops to form the archegonia. Okay, this is the archegonia. All right, and now over here just one of them undergoes meiosis to form megaspore mother cell, and the megaspore is produced, and the rest of the cell is known as endosperm, and this is the female gametophyte. So are you getting the concept? Fine. And now fertilization in gymnosperms happens within the megasporangium. Within the megasporangium. All right. So this endosperm gives nutrition to the developing zygote. So why did all of the microspores were released and underwent meiosis to form the male gametophyte or the pollen grains? Because here we have wind pollination in gymnosperms. The pollen grain which are produced on the male plant has to travel via wind to reach the archegonium, which is sedentary or non-motile in female. So look at the chances. If only one microspore is produced in the male plant, then will it be able to reach the female plant? No. So thousands of them are released to match or to undergo fertilization with the archegonia, and that completes the life cycle of gymnosperm.